Hi, I'm Arthur Haines, and I'm here today to share with you some thoughts as well as some of the plants that I gather during my spring foraging ventures. Nature has a way of giving us exactly what we need when we need it. And many people might think that during the spring of the year, one of the things that we need most is vitamin C, and we need these from the plants that we eat. It turns out that vitamin C is not limiting from the wild landscape, and that includes the northern areas and during the winter. Vitamin C is ever present. But what we do need this time of year is cleansing and detoxification. If you think about it, even though we have a Clean Air Act that has made some strides toward having cleaner air for us to breathe, the inside of our homes have no such protections. And there are so many things that we are exposed to, particularly during the winter when we tend to spend much more of our time indoors. These include VOCs from the paints that we have on our wall, the carpets and other upholstery that are off-gassing synthetic compounds, the flame retardants that are found in our mattresses and in the cushions of our sofas, and so on. And what we need this time of year are plants that have all of the medicine still intact, in other words, present in their foliage so that we can consume that and derive the benefits. And that's where wild plants come in. Wild plants have not had genetic modification occur to them. They still have their medicine intact, and many of the green plants that we consume in the spring of the year help us cleanse and detox through diuresis, which is urination, and diaphoresis, which is perspiration. Not to mention, wild plants have a much higher fiber to calorie ratio than cultivated plants, and that fiber certainly acts as a sponge and to scrub its way through our intestinal tract to help cleanse in that way. Not to mention, we're dealing with deep green chlorophyll-rich plants which have its own detoxification avenues. And even still, many of the plants that we gather this time of year are mucilage rich. And this mucilage acts in a way as flax, chia, and other herbs of that nature to also further cleanse our intestinal systems. If you notice these deep green broad-leaved plants growing from the ground along the edge of this terrace, and all the way down the edge of the terrace, these are wild leeks, or sometimes called ramps in the southeastern U.S., and this is a wild relative of garlic and onion. Now, this is a fairly uncommon to rare species in the northeastern United States, and unfortunately, commercial collectors have clued into this species as a wonderful delicacy and are selling it in great numbers to restaurants. So we have to discuss a bit how we go about ensuring that the populations of wild leeks are not damaged by our foraging. Wild leeks come up in the spring of the year, and they typically produce two broad flat leaves, as you can see here, which will be out for a time, and then the flowers will begin to emerge and the leaves will wither back. One of the issues is collecting of the bulbs, which is one of the things that many foragers go after, is lethal collection to the plant if it's not done correctly. However, collection of the above ground parts of the plant are not lethal, particularly if we only remove one of the leaves of the pear, so that the plant can still photosynthesize to create energy for flowering and fruiting. So this, in the spring of the year, is in fact the part I eat the most. It's a wonderful green, and when lightly cooked, you would swear that it had been sweetened because the foliage has such a wonderful flavor. Most of my bulb collection is done in the fall after the seeds have been formed, so as I dig bulbs, I can actually replant the seeds in those holes to be sure that the population isn't devastated by my collecting efforts. Now, those of you that are raw food enthusiasts, whether that be people who eat exclusively raw food, or whether you try to make sure that you're eating a proportion of raw food, whatever that may be, this is your time of year to interact with wild plants. Wild plants are different from cultivated plants. A, they have not been genetically modified through breeding, and they still contain all of their defensive measures, be those bitter tasting compounds, stinging hairs, whatever the case may be. The thing is this time of year, there's no insects out here. Look at the way I'm dressed for the Northwoods of Maine. I would be completely eaten alive if this was a month from now. But this time of year, insect activity is low, meaning the plants have very little to be worried about. So they produce very mild-tasting leaves. A month from now, when the insect herbivores commit themselves to munching on these plants, we're going to see a very different thing, and the plants are going to start producing many defensive compounds, some of which are acrid or have very bitter taste, and the foliage stops being a food and becomes much more of a medicine. Again, spring of the year is when you can really enjoy wild greens in their fullest without needing to deal with those off flavors that many foragers are accustomed to. Now this leaf in the center of the view here belongs to the trout lily, and if you look closely you'll notice a green coloration that has been mottled by a reddish cast, an easy way to identify this plant. This particular species, the American trout lily, has a bright yellow flower which you can see here. And this is a wonderful spring edible. The leaves are very mild and can be harvested much in the same way as the wild leek. In other words, so long as we only take one leaf and don't disturb the underground portions, we don't kill the plant. Now this one's going to disappear by early summer because it's a spring ephemeral. It takes care of all of its flowering and fruiting in the early part of the year before the canopy leaves out and shades this part of the forest. Another wonderful spring edible is the Carolina Spring Beauty, which is this plant here. Now these also appear early in the year and disappear by early summer. They have two flat leaves that appear opposite one another with small white flowers that have pink lines on them. This is related to purslane, and many people are aware of purslane's health benefits because of its massive abundance of omega-3 fatty acids, the immune stimulating and inflammation suppressing fatty acid. And this is simply a wild member that can be found in the forest. Unlike purslane, which is really only found in human disturbed areas, this one is found in wild places and has many of the same benefits as purslane. And again, you've got to get to this one early because it will be gone by calendar year summer. It's important to realize that once you become a forager, you are always a forager. And by that, I mean specifically that you never stop foraging, even in the off-season. I'm here in a silver maple floodplain forest, and this is a great place for collecting fiddlehead fern. However, I'm still too early in the season to be able to actually gather the croziers, the fiddleheads, that we consume as food. However, I'm always looking for the budding portions of the plants even before I can collect them, and I'm looking at the remnant portions, whether those are leaves and fruits from last year, that help me identify these plants. Point is that I'm always searching for plants and looking for the place that I will next be foraging, even if I've missed the plant in question this year and will be searching for it in the year to come. I'm actually holding two types of reproductive leaves. These are ferns from the same family. One of these belongs to the sensitive fern, not particularly relished as an edible. The other reproductive leaf belongs to the fiddlehead fern, the one that we consume as food and is an absolute delicious omega-9 fatty acid-rich plant. Do you know which one? And if you don't, you should learn, because this way you can be walking through river floodplains even in the off-season, identifying your next place to gather fiddleheads. Another plant that I'm very fortunate to have in great abundance here in this floodplain forest is two-leaved toothwort. And that's this plant here. As you can see, it has two leaves, each with 3 leaflets, and the flower buds are just coming along. Now this plant also grows in abundance early in the year, and it is a member of the mustard family and belongs to a larger group of mustard called bittercresses. Now this particular species, its leaves, its flowers, and even the underground stem called a rhizome, which is pale and very crisp, all taste of horseradish. This is a wonderful way to spice up wild salads and gives us a change from that typical green flavor that we find in abundance this time of year. Do remember that members of the onion family and the mustard family very, very well known to protect our epigenetic health because they activate tumor-suppressing genes that help our bodies fight cancer before the tumors reach a point where they become very difficult to combat. Keep in mind, epigenetics, which is an understanding that our environment influences the expression of our genes, gives us hope against genetic predisposition, a belief that says our genetic code completely dictates our health. We know that now to be dogma. It is not accurate, and that what we eat, what we breathe, our emotions, and the toxins that we come into contact to all affect genetic expression. And this is another way that wild plants positively affect genetic expression to help us maintain optimal health.